Today, the House Standing Committee on Economics versus the RBA. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, one today's post covering finance and problem news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, following a review of the central bank, the House Standing Committee on Economics warned that it expects the central bank to closely examine lessons learnt. In recapping a range of issues and responses from the Reserve Bank of Australia during the past year, the latest House Standing Committee on Economics report has reminded the central bank to closely examine lessons learnt because Australian households, workers and industries deserve nothing less. While a fully independent RBA review is due in March 2023, the Government Standing Committee report, titled Review of the Reserve Bank of Australia Annual Report 2021, acknowledged many positives but ultimately focused on matters arising from the central bank's public hearings in September 2022. The committee chair, Daniel Milano, said the committee's regular scrutiny of the RBA occurred at an unprecedented time. The domestic and global environment has changed rapidly since the last hearing in February. International pressures, including the war in Ukraine, a recovery in local demand as we come out of pandemic lockdowns, and supply-side constraints all combined to push inflation to its highest rate since 1990. In giving context of the results, the committee says it appreciated that several factors influencing inflation could not have been foreseen. During the hearing, the committee scrutinised the RBA's approach to monetary policy, including the inflation target, forward guidance on interest rate movements, and the path to bringing inflation down within the target range over time. The transparency and accountability in the RBA's monetary policy decision-making are paramount, and the committee will continue to scrutinise the RBA's policy responses to current and emerging threats to the economy, the report said. The committee also expects the RBA to closely examine lessons learnt from its approach to forecasting and the way it communicated this. Australian households, workers and industries deserve nothing less. The committee examined statements from the central bank over a range of issues, including the interaction between fiscal and monetary policy, climate change, housing affordability, productivity, and the labour market. Extra pressure on mortgage holders, of course, is the story of the day, because since the last hearing in February, the Standing Committee acknowledged that the environment had changed rapidly, with the Australian economy now battling inflation levels not seen in a generation due to a combination of domestic and global factors. The committee appreciates that several factors influencing inflation could not have been foreseen, it stated. However, it did re-examine the RBA's stance on counter-inflationary levers and the impact it was having on mortgage holders. And the report said in the case of owner-occupiers, the situation is nuanced. Changes to mortgage interest payments relative to income were quite an important consideration in the RBA's decision-making process. However, to address the current high inflation environment, rate rises could not be avoided, they said. Citing RBA Governor Lowe, it documented these words: "I've said this before, it's very difficult for people, but this is the point. It will be even more difficult if inflation stays high. If you've got a mortgage, you don't like higher interest rates. We understand that, and it hurts." And the committee heard, as the RBA expanded on the very uneven distributional impact of interest rate rises on mortgage holders, that at the worst affected end of the spectrum, the RBA's forward-looking analysis suggests that approximately 15% of borrowers would not have any spare cash flow by the end of 2023 due to rate rises and increases in the cost of living. Conversely, it heard there is another cohort of borrowers who are unlikely to experience stress in their mortgage repayments. These are the households that had accumulated savings during the pandemic. At the aggregate level, household savings expanded markedly at the time and now have the ability to draw down on those savings as rates rise, it outlined. Additionally, the RBA outlined that about one-third of borrowers, both on a fixed or variable rate, are not going to have any increases to the actual realised payments out to the end of next year. And the committee also sought the RBA's views on increasing housing supply in the long term to support financial stability and to enable households to adapt to changing monetary policy, noting that one of the biggest impacts of an increase in interest rates is on housing affordability. And in response, Dr. Lowe emphasised that while cyclical variation in housing prices is driven by interest rates, and therefore the RBA, the high cost of purchasing a home in Australia stems from, quote, structural factors. These are the preferences of Australians about where they want to live, the investments made in transportation and urban design, the taxation system, and the availability of mortgage finance. And the Governor continued that interest rates influence the cycle, but not structurally. We've seen in countries parts of the US are a good example, where interest rates have been lower than they were here, but housing prices are much lower because, as a society, they've made different choices about where they live, investment in transport and taxation. It's the choices we've made as a people that have given us high housing prices, even though interest rates influence the cycle. The central bank can't do anything about that. As an individual, not as a central bank, I think it would be better if we'd made different choices to give a lower average level of housing prices that would give people more opportunity and people would need to borrow less. So everything we, the RBA, have done, if you've asked what choices society could make to give high housing prices, we have made them all. Not to say it's good or bad, but that's what we've done. Now, there's two very important observations here. Firstly, in a way, the Economic Committee is sort of deflecting a lot of the discussions back to the RBA, but then the RBA is saying nothing to do with us, it's all to do with what society has done. But the fact of the matter is this. One, interest rates and availability of credit is the most significant lever of property prices. And of course, taking interest rates a lot lower and loosening lending over the last few years has been one of the main reasons why mortgage rates have been lower, and therefore lending has gone through the roof, and that has driven property prices higher. We're seeing the reverse now, and of course the most recent data from CoreLogic shows just how quickly property prices are falling. So the question I have for both the committee and the RBA is, when are you going to wake up and understand that your decisions about interest rates and credit availability and underwriting standards are by far the most critical question to consider when it comes to controlling house prices? Blaming it on broader societal issues or supply and some of those other things, including migration, of course, is missing the point. But of course, neither the committee nor indeed the RBA want to recognise the truth here. Credit and credit availability is directly linked to where property prices go. And it has proved to be a disastrous policy over the last 20 years, with more households in debt, with housing affordability worse than it's been for almost ever, and of course less people owning their homes outright, and more people going into retirement with massive debt. We have financialized property in the process, and that in the short term has made our GDP look better, but structurally and also socially, it's ruinous. The RBA and Parliament should both stand up and take accountability rather than trying to deflect it away and blaming somebody else. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.